The first time I saw the new locks on my parents' house, I thought someone had broken in. They were bright, polished metal, nothing like the old scratched handles my father refused to replace. The porch light was on too, even though nobody was supposed to be there. I stood at the gate for a while, keys in my hand, trying to convince myself I had the wrong day or the wrong memory. Then my key didn't fit. I tried twice, slower the second time, turning the metal carefully like the problem might be my hands instead of the lock. It stopped halfway and refused to move. I stepped back and stared at the door as if it might explain itself. That was when the curtains shifted inside, a second later. My sister opened the door just enough to look out. She didn't smile. She didn't even look surprised. "You shouldn't be here," she said, "not hello. Not how was the drive." Just that. I laughed a little because the sentence didn't make sense. This was our parents' house. The place we grew up. The place I had a key to for almost 20 years. I came to check on things, I told her. "Why did you change the locks?" She hesitated long enough to make me uncomfortable, then she said, very calmly, "Because it's my house now." I honestly thought she was joking, but she didn't move aside to let me in. She didn't explain. She just stood there holding the door like I was a stranger who had knocked by mistake. And that was the moment I realized something had been decided without me, something big, something final, I just didn't know what yet. I asked her what she meant, and she gave me an answer that sounded rehearsed. "Our parents signed it over," she said. A few months ago. She said it like she was explaining a small administrative detail, something boring and routine. I kept waiting for the rest of the sentence, some clarification that would make it reasonable. It never came. "Signed what over?" I asked. "The house." The word hung there between us, heavy and awkward. I told her that made no sense. Our parents had always talked about leaving everything equally. It was one of the few things they agreed on without arguing. Half for me, half for her. Clean and simple. She shrugged like it wasn't her problem if I didn't understand. "It's already done." I asked if they were inside. "No." "Then where are they?" "Staying somewhere else." She wouldn't say where. Every question I asked got shorter answers. She stayed behind the door the whole time, fingers wrapped around the edge like she expected me to push my way in. I didn't. I just stood there, feeling like I'd missed an important meeting everyone else had attended. Finally I said, "You could have told me." She looked at me in a way I couldn't read, not guilty, not defensive, just tired. I didn't think it would matter. That sentence bothered me more than anything else she said, because it meant she had thought about me. She had just decided I wasn't important enough to include. I left without arguing. Not because I believed her, because I needed time to figure out what kind of lie I was dealing with. On the drive home, I kept remembering how easily she had said it, "My house now," like she had been waiting to say it for a long time. I called our parents that evening, expecting confusion on their end, maybe even annoyance that my sister had stirred up drama over nothing. Instead, the conversation felt strangely controlled from the first minute. My father answered, his voice quieter than usual. He said they were fine before I even asked. He told me not to worry before I mentioned anything specific. It felt like he already knew why I was calling. "So, what's going on with the house?" I asked. There was a pause long enough for me to check the phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "It's being handled," he said finally. "Handled how?" "Your sister is taking care of things." That wasn't an answer. It sounded like something you say to a neighbor asking about yard work. "I heard you signed it over to her." Another pause. "Yes," just one word, no explanation. No discussion. No mention of me. I waited for him to say more, but he didn't. In the background I heard the faint noise of a television, louder than his voice, like he was sitting far away from the phone. "Why?" I asked. It made sense. That was all he offered. My mother got on the line next, and somehow it felt worse. She sounded overly cheerful, like she was trying to smooth over a problem without naming it. "Your sister needs stability right now," she said. "This works best for everyone, everyone." I asked. Yes, but she wouldn't explain what that meant either. By the time the call ended, I wasn't calmer. I was unsettled in a different way. It didn't sound like they'd been pressured, it sounded like they had agreed, and somehow that made it feel less like a mistake. And more like a decision made deliberately without me. For the next few weeks, I tried to convince myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Paperwork mistakes happened. Maybe the transfer was temporary, something about taxes or repairs or insurance. I even told a friend it was probably just one of those technical arrangements families make, but the more I thought about it, the less it lined up with what I knew about my parents. They weren't impulsive people. My father kept receipts from 15 years ago in labeled envelopes. My mother compared prices between 3 stores before buying a kettle. Signing over their house, their only real asset, wasn't something they would treat casually, and if it was temporary, why change the locks? That question kept circling back. Eventually I drove by again, this time without telling my sister. Her car was in the driveway. So was a small moving truck backed up near the garage. A man I didn't recognize carried out a box and disappeared inside. I sat across the street longer than I should have, watching strangers move through windows I knew by heart. The dining room light flicked on, then off. A ladder leaned against the hallway wall. Someone had taken down the old framed photos that used to hang near the stairs. It looked less like maintenance and more like replacement. I texted my sister, "Are you renovating?" She didn't respond for hours. When she finally did, the message was short. "Just making it livable, livable." The word irritated me more than I expected. The house had always been livable. Maybe outdated, maybe a little worn, but it was solid, unless she meant livable for her. That was the first time the idea crossed my mind that she wasn't just holding the house, she might be planning to stay. A week later, I couldn't take it anymore. I filed the paperwork to contest the transfer. I told myself I wasn't angry, just protecting what was rightfully mine. The legal forms felt like armor. Every signature I collected, every document I submitted, was a small act of control in a situation that had spiraled out of my reach. I called my sister, hoping confrontation might clear the fog. She picked up, voice calm, almost bored. "I saw the papers," she said. "You don't have to waste your time." "I have to," I replied. "This isn't yours to take." "It is," she said flatly. "Your parents signed it. They wanted me here." Her certainty was infuriating. I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to scream. To shake her, to demand she see reason. Instead, I said, "Why didn't they tell me?" She paused longer than normal this time. Then, almost reluctantly, she said, "Because you wouldn't understand." That one line stuck with me. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered. Every memory of that house, my father's old armchair, my mother's recipe notes taped to the fridge, felt suddenly foreign. At night, I lay awake imagining her walking through the rooms I had grown up in, rearranging things, making them hers. The house wasn't just a building anymore, it was a battleground. I started noticing small things. Texts I hadn't received. Messages deleted, subtle hints of conversations I hadn't been part of. I convinced myself she had planned this long before the signature. Every word she said, every polite pause, every casual shrug now seemed loaded with intent. By the time the court date came, I believed I knew the truth. My sister had betrayed me. She had stolen our home, our family trust, and nothing would bring it back. I was ready for the hearing. I thought I was prepared for the confrontation. I had no idea what waited for me inside the courtroom. The courtroom smelled of varnish and stale coffee, the kind of smell that immediately makes you tense without realizing it. I sat in the back row, hands folded tightly, watching my sister across the aisle. She didn't look nervous. Not even slightly. She sat with her head high, fingers laced neatly, like this was just another day at work. The lawyer I'd hired handed me a folder thick with papers, property deeds, emails, text transcripts, everything I thought I needed to prove she had acted unfairly. Every page felt heavier than the last. I flipped through them, imagining the judge reading my side and immediately siding with me. I wanted justice. I wanted acknowledgement that what she had done was wrong. Then the hearing began. The judge's voice was calm but sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. Each side presented their arguments. My lawyer laid out the timeline, emphasizing that I had not been consulted, that the house had been treated as if I didn't exist. Every point was precise, calculated. I felt a surge of righteousness, imagining my sister squirming under scrutiny, and then it happened. She spoke, not the angry, defensive words I had expected. Not the excuses or apologies. She presented a single document, a notarized letter from my parents. "I thought this was clear," she said softly. I skimmed it. My heart stopped. It looked official, like everything my lawyer had been building against her crumbled in front of me. According to the letter, my parents had explicitly given her full ownership, citing reasons about long-term plans and stability I hadn't understood. I felt frozen. The courtroom blurred. This was the revelation I had been waiting for, the one that made sense. My sister hadn't stolen the house. She had simply been following instructions. For a moment, I felt relief wash over me. Then, beneath it, something darker started to creep in. If she wasn't in the wrong, then who was I? The judge leaned back in her chair, watching me closely, as if she could see the storm brewing behind my eyes. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. The letter from my parents sat on the table, crisp and unyielding, and suddenly everything I had believed about fairness, betrayal, and family loyalty felt like it was shifting beneath my feet. My sister didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She just looked at me, not triumphantly, but cautiously, as if she knew I was seeing something I hadn't understood before. It was then I noticed a footnote on the document. Something small, almost easy to miss. It said, "This arrangement was made with full knowledge and consent of the eldest child, including financial adjustments to balance inheritance." I blinked. My mind raced. Financial adjustments? Inheritance? Suddenly, the whole narrative I had built, the righteous anger, the legal battle, the imagined betrayal, started to unravel. I realized my parents had intended for me to get compensated, through savings and assets I hadn't known about. They had assumed I would trust them enough to discuss it before the transfer. But I hadn't. I hadn't asked. I hadn't paid attention. I had seen the change of locks, the court filings, and assumed the worst. The courtroom felt smaller, tighter, suffocating. My moral outrage, the energy that had carried me into this battle, now turned inward. Every accusation I had made, every heated text, every thought of betrayal, it was all mine. I had judged my sister without knowing the full story. She whispered to me later, outside the courtroom, almost too quietly to hear, "You fought me, but maybe you were fighting them yourself," and in that moment, guilt hit me harder than anger ever had. Not at her. At me. For the first time, I questioned whether I had been the real betrayer all along. The drive home was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your temples and makes every thought echo. I kept turning the situation over in my mind, replaying every interaction with my sister, every word from my parents. It wasn't simple anymore. I had thought I was defending what was mine. But now, I felt like I had stormed into a plan I didn't understand, judged my sister, and wasted days on anger that was misdirected. At home, I sat in my old chair, the one my father always complained about when it creaked too loudly. The room smelled faintly of polish and dust, memories lingering in the corners. I realized I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel relieved. I felt hollow, like I had been carrying a weight that wasn't mine to lift. I sent my sister a text. I'm sorry." No reply came. I didn't expect one. Maybe she was used to me making the first move, or maybe she just wanted the story to end without me intruding further. A few days later, I opened a letter from my parents. It detailed the inheritance adjustments, the trust funds, the plans they had made for me to receive my fair share. All of it had been intentional. All of it had been explained. But I had never asked. I had assumed, accused, fought. I thought about confronting them, demanding why they hadn't told me sooner. But even as the words formed in my mind, I realized the truth. They had trusted me enough to handle the house in my sister's hands, expecting I would trust them back. I hadn't. Now, I walk a careful line in my own thoughts. My sister isn't the villain. I'm not completely innocent either. There's a weight that lingers, a question I can't shake. When you assume betrayal, are you ever really innocent? Some nights, I catch myself staring at the empty porch light, thinking about the door I once couldn't open, wondering if the real theft wasn't of property, but of trust, of time, of understanding. And maybe that's the hardest thing of all, realizing the only thing I truly lost was certainty.